And with me now in studio is Ambassador Sanjeev Singla, the Indian ambassador to Israel. Sir, thank you so much for being with me. Ambassador, this is a very ambitious project, a rapid results test that could provide results within minutes, could be a game changer. Could it work? And what does it say about Israel-Indian innovation together?
Indeed, it is. India and Israel, as you know, are strategic partners, and the two prime ministers, they've spoken twice during the crisis, and during those conversations, they directed their officials to pool in their scientific expertise to see how we can tackle the pandemic much better, much faster. And as a result, both the countries are now cooperating across the entire spectrum, if I can say so. And when I say across the entire spectrum, essentially across all the four elements of it, starting with, for instance, personal protection equipment, where India has supplied some personal protection equipment to Israel.
Did you help with that? I know Netanyahu requested gear to be sent to Israel, and India complied. They were able to send what they could. Were you part of that effort?
Yes, it was, of course, a collective effort, and we were very happy that we were able to help out Israel to the extent we could, because the pandemic, as you know, was breaking out in both countries at that time. The second part of the component is diagnosis of the pandemic, and that's what you were alluding to when you mentioned. There are some exciting diagnostic technologies that are being developed, both in Israel as well as in India. And the idea is to use India's strength as a test bed to scale up these technologies very rapidly. And some of these technologies are really exciting.
You mentioned the conversation, several conversations between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Netanyahu. India, the world's largest democracy, Israel, the only democracy in the Middle East, but it's a small country. Who's learning from who?
I think both of us are learning from each other. As I said, you have strengths as a startup nation. India has strengths in its large pool of technical manpower, in its vast market. We are, in a way, pharmacy to the world. We are the world's largest generics producer, for instance. We are a major global vaccine manufacturing hub. So when it comes to the third part of the spectrum, which is how do you forecast a second wave, for instance? That's where you involve artificial intelligence and other technologies, where the two sides are exploring how we can do that. And the fourth and the most crucial part, which is the actual treatment for this pandemic. And here we have about 30 research teams in India, including a private company, which is one of the world's largest manufacturers of vaccine, looking at how we can speed it up. You have some firms in Israel also. But the point to remember here is that even if somebody does come up with a vaccine very quickly, it's another question altogether to be able to scale it up for distribution, for it to have any meaning. And that's where India's strength as a major pharma player in the world comes into play.
You mentioned some of India's strengths, its technical ability, its medical know-how, its human capital and education system. After coronavirus, should India be a top trading partner, the #1 trading partner, even now surpassing China? Should there be tough lessons learned from this? And is there an opportunity for India to reach the pinnacle?
I think there are tremendous opportunities which are offered by this particular pandemic. But before we get to those opportunities, I think we should remember a sobering note, which is that this pandemic has had a very adverse impact on all the economies. And to that extent, bilateral relations, business relations between any two countries will not remain immune to a large extent. But having said that, as I said, there are tremendous opportunities. For instance, the relevant areas which have been thrown up by this pandemic, like cyber tech, where Israel has strengths. And in India, it's growing at a rate of about 21% per annum. In 4 or 5 years, it'll be more than $13 billion worth of market. Yeah. With so many opportunities in verticals like banking, telecom, financial services and insurance, IT.
We're also seeing defense cooperation as well between India and Israel.
Absolutely. And the other sector which I think has been brought into sharp relief by this particular pandemic is the biotechnology and health sector, where now we are going to invest massively in health infrastructure in India. And Israel has strengths when it comes to the intersection of biology and technology. And India can be a huge market, as well as I said, a test bed for scaling up and testing some of those technologies.
You mentioned some of the challenges because every economy, the world is suffering because of coronavirus. What does that mean for the chance of a free trade deal?
Well, if you're asking me, would it happen by Rosh Hashanah? My answer would be an honest no. But having said that, let me also say that the good news is that the two sides have re-engaged constructively. And in fact, they've had a dialogue over a video conference, I think only about 2 weeks ago.
You're being diplomatic about it and throwing your knowledge of Jewish holidays. But do you think it will happen? Is it still something in the distance, or could it actually happen soon?
I would say I'm very optimistic because the renewed discussion is now focused on a preferential trade agreement in goods. So each side has given the other a list of about 275 to 280 tariff lines of goods. And the idea is now to examine them very quickly. And on our part, we are very keen to keep the momentum going so as to bring the whole thing to a speedy conclusion.
Generally speaking, that review process could take weeks or months?
I would say I'll say it'll take months.
I want to ask about the fact that as a diplomat, you now in Israel, for the first time ever, have a prime minister and an alternate prime minister. You have a government that will have two prime ministers, a unity government. It's one government, but basically two administrations in the life of that government. What challenges does that pose for you as a diplomat as you're working to strengthen Israeli-Indian cooperation?
Well, I would say the challenges of another nature, but coming to your question specifically, it's always, frankly, wonderful to have two leaders who enjoy good chemistry with each other. And I think we are very fortunate that Prime Minister Netanyahu and Prime Minister Modi have a wonderful chemistry for the simple reason that it helps pave the way for implementation of decisions very swiftly.
But in a year, you're going to have a new guy. You have Benny Gantz coming in as Prime Minister, and that's a new dynamic.
Which is what I was coming to, which is that Prime Minister Modi time and again has emphasized that when it comes to relations between two countries, especially who are strategic partners like India and Israel or India and USA, the idea is to take the relationship beyond the Beltway. The idea is to nurture the relationship to a point where it has a momentum regardless of who the leaders are and regardless of the two bureaucracies.
It's beyond the one man in the office.
Exactly.
Last, I want to ask, this is COVID-19. It is a coronavirus, but not the coronavirus. Every few years, it seems there's another coronavirus originating out of China. Is there an opportunity economically to strengthen Indian business, to get large international corporations perhaps to recenter their international hubs in India instead?
I think we are seeing tremendous business sentiment towards diversification of supply chains, and that's understandable.
Because of the coronavirus crisis, it's spurred it.
Particularly because of the coronavirus, and to that extent, it's understandable. And India, of course, is a very large, very diversified economy, which offers considerable strengths to be a hub. And to that extent, we are very excited about the opportunities, and we have undertaken more reforms in the last few weeks to sort of give a momentum to that.
Ambassador, great to have you here as we zoomed in on the issues together. Thank you so much for your time. Great to have you in the studio.
It was a pleasure.